Thank you for joining today's session. As you all know, we love to start things off with a fun icebreaker as folks trickle in. I love to ask Pete and Peter, no matter when, of A, are you a dessert fan, first of all? And then
Ooh.
B, if you are a dessert fan and you go to a restaurant and you're so full, but you see this dessert on the menu, you're like, I gotta make room. What is it?
Peter, after you.
God, I'm gonna do so bad at this. I am not a dessert person.
Mm.
Um, it's funny, like my girlfriend, definitely that way. Like tiramisu or like anything chocolate, like she will eat a huge meal and we'll dive into that. But for me, like I actually normally skip dessert and we'll just have like an espresso. I know that's super
Oh,
There
lame,
you go.
but that's
Espresso.
me.
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of like toffee things, right? Because it's kind of savory, right? Like those
Yeah.
are that's my go-to there. So like I like a toffee cake and things like that. I'm a fan of.
Pete, I was
What
just
about
gonna say the same
what about
thing.
you, Angelica? Oh, really? Sorry, I stole yours.
No, that's great. We can share dessert. I'm a huge sticky toffee pudding fan, but you rarely see it on the menu. So when I do see it, I will dive right in, no matter how full I am.
You gotta get it.
And for folks I just moved to Vancouver, BC, and I'm still on the hunt for the best sticky toffee pudding in the city. So
Ooh.
if folks tuning in are from Vancouver, please let me know. But there is a restaurant in Cole Harbour that I found that has one of the best sticky toffee puddings. The restaurant is called Brass Fish, which is a weird restaurant name for a pub, but very good sticky toffee pudding. And also let us know where you're calling in from. Let us know if you have a favorite dessert and what city you're calling in from in the chat below.
Nice.
Killer. All right, so let's kick things off for today's topic: shoot par and crush quota with data driven golf and sales management. But before we begin, today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through our online session like the one you're at today. We also have an online forum and our quarterly summits, and we're just getting back into in-person events, so stay tuned. We might come to a city near you. Now, before we dive in, let's go over some housekeeping notes. First, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access the recording and key takeaways along with Pete's slide deck on the MSP previous event page before the end of the day. Second, if you have a question for our panelists, please be sure to use the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner or the chat box below. Now, I'm pleased to announce our sponsor for today's event. I'm going to hand it off to Pete to say a few words about Atrium, and then I'm going to come back for a wrap up. Pete, take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks, Angelica. Let me share my screen here. There we go. Cool. Hey guys, my name is Pete Kazanji. I am one of the founders and CRO of Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software, and so essentially what that is it's software that helps AE, SDR, and AM/CSM managers use data to improve team performance. And so the way that Atrium does that is by continuously monitoring dozens and dozens of AE and SDR KPIs, and then proactively alerting managers and leadership when something goes off of their reps, their teams, and so on. And so what this means is that managers can get ahead of coaching insights faster, so you can drive positive behavior change. That's going to be a theme we're going to be talking about today, is like driving positive behavior change and win. And one of the great things about Atrium is it only takes about 2 minutes to set up via read-only connection to your Salesforce account. So that's a little bit about us. Kind of give you folks a little bit of introduction of myself. As I noted, I'm the co-founder and CRO of Atrium. Before Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's really where I kind of went from being a business generalist founder to our first first seller, first sales manager, first sales leader. When we were acquired by Monster, we had like a 20-person sales organization, and then I was responsible for new product sales at Monster subsequent to that. So that's a little bit on me. Subsequent to that, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then also founded Modern Sales Pros here. And even more importantly, I'm super pumped to have Peter Biro, the better Peter at Atrium. Um, we make the joke that you're only allowed to have you have to be named Peter in order to work at Atrium, who is a senior sales strategy advisor. You know, our fancy name for account executives, and a team lead here at Atrium. Peter, maybe you can introduce yourself, let folks know what you spent your time on here at Atrium, and like maybe let them know some of the sales motions that you worked on before Atrium.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, everyone. My name's Peter. I've been at Atrium for about 3 years now. I spend my time literally day in and day out working with sales leaders, sales managers, sales operations folks, sales enablement, really working to hone their data-driven sales management chops, specifically just to help them build a more efficient sales organization. It's like super fun. I get to nerd out on sales motions all day. Like I've seen it all at this point. It's pretty cool.
You really have.
Yeah. And like historically, like I've gotten to see a lot of sales motions being a seller, which is cool too. Like I've sold everything from dental software to mom and pop shops to like dental enterprises. I've sold recruiting tech into HR, run the gamut. So fun to get to advise people and
But now
check
you
through
get to work
data.
with like hundreds of different sales organizations and help them modernize their sales management motion. Also, you, Peter is one of our. We have this like golf posse at Atrium, for for good or for bad, and Peter is like one of the ringleaders of our golf posse. So he was one of the inspirations for this presentation. So for folks who are interested, and you're probably on this call if you're interested in golf. I mean, maybe not. Kind of like, I just didn't have anything else better to do. We're gonna go ahead and drop a link here. So if you'd like to get a copy of Every Shot's Count, Shot Counts is a really sweet data-driven golf book written by Mark Brody. I think he's a professor at, I want to say, Columbia Business School, if I recall correctly. So super cool book there. Also, my favorite sales coaching book is called Five Secrets to the Sales Coach by Corey Bray. And then we'll also send you a dozen Atrium golf balls as well. Callaway Super Soft.
They're solid.
They're solid. They're solid. Yeah,
that's good swag.
Cool. So what we're going to be talking about today is how data has really positively impacted the game of golf, how folks, including yourself, can use data to improve your golf game. And then also kind of like the inverse, how the data revolution in sales management and how people can use data and metrics to improve rep and team performance. So it should be pretty fun. I think the big thing to kind of realize here is that what has changed in golf is that there is now way better data capture than there used to be, right? Like, data capture back in the day was like your scorecard, right? And so now, and like with poor data capture, you have like a poor ability to kind of like use that information in order to improve your performance. Whereas now we have all this like way better way of capturing data. And so what people are then now as a result doing is using that to improve their behaviors, right? To make themselves better golfers. And so we're going to talk about kind of like some of the basics here, some of the more advanced data as well. And then we're going to talk about how folks use that data to make themselves more effective. So obviously, there's what I call manually recorded data basics here. These are things like, your score, how many pars you're catching, right? How many birdies you're making, how many bogeys you're making, et cetera, et cetera. These are like, pretty rudimentary, kind of like table stakes, right? Everyone's like pretty familiar with these things. But then what ends up happening is you can still record manually, and this is without getting into like launch trackers or swing recording or anything like that. You can start recording things manually that will give you a lot better sense of like where the soft spots are in your game. And then once you have a comprehension of where those soft spots are, then you can change your behavior, whether that's in game playing or at the range, right, practicing to improve your execution. So some examples of these would be fairways and regulations, also known as FERS, right? It's the number of fairways that you're hitting off a tee, right? So it's kind of like how good you are at like landing your drive in the fairway. Greens in regulation is kind of the equivalent, but that's the number of greens that you're hitting where you still have 2 shots remaining for par, right? Like you're giving yourself a chance at 2 putting in order to hit par. Then there's your putting average. And so the putting average is how many putts you're taking per green that you're hitting there, right? And so like with these right here, you can already, what you're doing is you're decomposing the score of a given hole. And like this, of course, this like your aggregate score behavior into, am I doing a good job on hitting fairways? Am I doing a good job on hitting greens? And am I doing a good job once I get onto the green? There's more kind of like sophisticated things here, like, you know, can I save myself if I maybe miss the green? Can I get onto the green and then into the hole even if I didn't hit the green? So that's scrambling percentage, sand saves, and bogey avoidance. These are a little bit more complicated, but like literally if you're only just focusing on something to start, a more advanced thing to start on, these are really good things here. Peter, which of these are you working on right now? Are you working on your FERS, your GERS, or your putting?
You know, it's funny. We actually have like a group text with a bunch of the golfers here at Atrium.
Nerds.
And yeah, so nerdy. Because like we're not even texting our scores or like how our handicap is changing. We're literally texting each other FER and GER percentage. Because like why not?
Yep.
For me, it's all about GER percentage right now. All about GER percentage. That changed from a couple months ago, but like that is the softest spot in my game at the moment.
Great. Right.
Yeah.
That's continuous improvement, right? Like we diagnose one thing that we have a problem with, we hopefully work to fix it, and then we move on to the next thing once, you know, the next constraint. And so in order to do a good job of recording this before you can start diagnosing and then coaching yourself, you need a golf CRM. You need to start recording your intra game, or sorry, intra hole scores. And so there's a couple, you know, there's a whole variety of these. The USGA makes one. Peter, I think you use this one, right? 18 birdies.
Yeah, I use 18 birdies. You know, shout out Bay Area company. Got to use it. You know.
Do you like it?
I do. It's really good. I think it's the best free one that I've come across. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and so it does a bunch of fun things. Like it allows you to say like, hey, I'm shooting from this far out. Did I hit the green? Did I not hit the green? You know, et cetera, et cetera. I'm shooting from off the tee. Did I hit the fairway? Did I not hit the fairway? And then of course, lo and behold, you look up and you're like 5 rounds later and you start having some statistically significant data. You have a golf CRM. Weird, right? So cool. So then like if we're recording this data, well, we're not just recording it for funsies. Obviously, we want to do a good job of like using it to make ourselves more effective. And so one way to kind of think about this, and this actually applies very much to sales, we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, but like you can work backwards, like the same way that you want to work backwards from a go live date from a deal standpoint. We want to work backwards from getting the ball in the hole, right? So if you think about this, like if our goal is to get the ball in the hole, right, from the green, right, the way that we measure whether or not we're doing a good job of that is our putting average. If we want to get it on the green, right, in order to enable ourselves to have a good chance of getting into the hole, well, the way that we would measure that is with greens and regulation. And then similarly, if we want to put ourselves in a good position to get it on the green, well, ideally we're shooting from the fairway and we're not shooting from the rough, unlike me, right? And so the way that we would do that is we'd want to be measuring our fairways in regulation there, right? So the whole idea here is we can break down, like essentially we're decomposing our game, right, into 3 different parts, the same way that you would decompose a sales motion into different stages that you would go after there, right? And so I think one thing, once you kind of break that down, you can start understanding like what good looks like, and then specifically where your hitch is in your specific giddy up. One thing, and I actually think Peter hit me to this, was that if you look at this, you can kind of see that driving distance here. Here's the LPGA, here's the PGA. Obviously, the PGA Tour folks really drive quite like much more substantially. And so male like low handicap and mid handicap players end up kind of playing a little bit more, kind of like behave a little bit more like LPGA players. And so as a result, what you should be doing is maybe tuning your game accordingly. There, like we should. We're all not we're not all the like killer leaders on the tour here, and instead we can instead aspire to be a little bit more accurate as opposed to being like a little bit longer there. But importantly, what you can understand is like what good looks like there before you start getting into where my specific kind of hitch might be. The other thing that is kind of fun about this, these are some aggregate benchmarks from a website called The Grint. I have no idea what that means. But what this is doing is this is actually really kind of cool. You can see this is fairway in regulation percentage based on handicap range. And one thing I thought that was really fascinating here is that if you want to get to different handicap ranges, there's like these step functions here, where if you look at this, in order to get to a 10 to 15 handicap, right? You gotta do a much better job of hitting your fairways. You can kind of see that this is like linear here, and then like there's no way that you're going to get to a 10 to 15 handicap without doing a much better job hitting fairways. And then similarly, like, there's no way that you're going to get to nearly to scratch there without doing a much better job of hitting the fairway. So I thought that was really fascinating. And then similarly, what you can kind of see here with respect to greens and regulation is it's a little bit more linear there, where in order to get out of like the really like the dumps here with a 20 to 25 handicap, you got to get your greens percentage into the 20% range there, and then from there on out it's really just kind of like a case of like linear improvement there. Peter, anything surprising in here to you?
No, actually, going over this with you, this is what drove me to start focusing more on GERS.
Really?
So I'm at that point, like, I'm not a great golfer. I have fun. It's a good time. I take it somewhat seriously. But I'm like a 19 handicap right now, right? So
Nice.
like looking at fairways and regulation, yeah, to get down to like, what is that, 10 to 15, I'm going to have to make a pretty significant jump there. But I'm right in that range where like working on that second or third shot and getting my GERS better should make a more significant difference, right? Move the needle more in my score on average. So that's what I based that on recently.
I love it. Nice. Wonderful. So then the next thing here is we're talking about manually recorded stats. So then the next thing is, well, I think here in sales land we're very familiar with call recording. What about swing recording, right? And that's actually something that you can do, right? They have these things called launch trackers, which is I don't know, a more fun way of describing a little radar. There's obviously very fancy ones, and there's kind of like more portable ones. Peter, I think I got one for you to test out as a prototype. How's the Swing Caddy been treating you recently?
It's awesome. It
Oh,
is
yeah?
rad. Favorite thing, like, makes actually practicing at the range like fun. Again, I'm a nerd. I like numbers, but like practice is more fun now and like meaningful. It's cool.
I love it. Yeah, and so the things that end up being kind of recorded here, you can start getting into a lot more kind of specific items, which then can help you more granularly diagnose these sort of things, right? So like, for instance, you might have a GERS problem. Is that GERS problem the result of, parts of your swing? Is it a problem with club selection, et cetera, et cetera? These might be the things that you would be able to diagnose via launch tracker, right? So kind of some of the things that end up being recorded here: carry distance, the distance ball travels in the air before touching the ground, the club speed, like how fast you're swinging the club, ball speed, how fast the ball's coming off of the club, launch angle, are you doing a good job of getting the ball up in the air that you would expect from the club that you're using, smash factor is the relationship between the club speed and the ball speed coming off of it. Like, are you doing a good job of hitting the ball square on and making sure that you're transferring the velocity from the club to the ball? Spin rate, how fast the ball is spinning, which of course I think is related to, are you doing a good job of getting the thing lofted? and then of course the apex, which is like how high you're getting the ball in the air. And so one of the fun things is that when once you have this data recorded, you can start kind of seeing relationships associated with it. So in this case, like okay, shocker, right? Like if you swing the club faster, right, faster average club speed here, obviously the ball is going to go further. Okay, well that's like not super complicated. Now the thing that actually is interesting and kind of a good insight, and this is the thing I was kind of like touching on earlier, is if you look at club speed head here, the average male golfer in the United States, has a club speed that's more akin to an LPGA Tour member than despite what you might tell yourself, that versus a PGA Tour pro. And so not surprising, but you would say like, okay, cool, if that's the reality, then maybe I should adjust my behavior accordingly and play more like this, as opposed to telling myself a story, I'm going to play like this, right? And so you can kind of see that happening here, where this is a kind of a rehash of the previous slide, where if you can target in the case of the PGA Tour players, they have a tendency to have lower FERS, because they're trying to go long, probably because the courses that they're playing are probably pretty long, and they have to try to go long. The reality is though, for all of you duffers out there, that's not something that you're going to have to be doing. And so instead, sacrificing some distance for better accuracy is a much better way of achieving a lower score. And so then what we're going to talk about here is, great, how do we now use this data to make ourselves better, both in the game and then also in practice, right? And this is where we can really analogize this to sales management and sales coaching, because what we're going to do is we're going to use data to understand where the hitch is in our giddy up. And then we're going to focus in, probably not on like 3 things at once, we're probably going to focus in on like 1 thing at once, coach that, and then track whether or not we're improving that. So again, remember, these are our objectives and these are our measures. So we want to get it in the hole. We're going to look at our putting average. We want to get it on the green. We're going to look at our greens and regulations. We want to get it on the fairway. We're going to look at our fairways and regulations. And so in this case, one of our AEs, actually our sales manager, is a super nerd. And so he obviously put together a spreadsheet on this, right? Where you can populate your round data here. And then of course, because I'm a goofball, I decided to add a bunch of graphs to it. We're going to go ahead and drop this template into the chat here. I think people will enjoy checking it out. But importantly, what you can see is here are those 3 key metrics, like input metrics, and then here's the output metric, the score. And you can see that this is change over time, like these are the dates associated with it. And so what you can see here down below is, we got our FERS, we got our GERS, and we got our putts per hole. And so, which are our putting average. And so one thing that you can kind of see here is like, yeah, okay, if things are red across the board, you're going to have like a bad score. But what's interesting here is you can kind of see as this player here got better, just having one of those metrics that is high performance is obviously not enough to have a really great game. Similarly, what you can see here is if you have 2, right, you can still have a problem, right, with a third and like not get where you want to go, right? And so what it really takes is it takes all 3 of those things working together in order to put together a really great round. And as you can kind of see here, this player got to a personal best 81 with a 50% FER, a 44% GER, and a 1.7 putt there. And so the thing that ends up kind of being fun here is you can actually see how this player was coaching himself to get better over time, right? And so what you can see here is like if we look at our GERs, right? Not great, not great, gets a little bit better, not great, not great, and then really, really buckles in and starts focusing on those in a meaningful fashion, and does a much better job on that, even on the same courses, right? So you can see like how do you pronounce this, Peter?
Corica, yeah.
Corica, right? So like a 22 and a 17 at Karika, 22 at Karika, and then lo and behold, we've got a 44 on our GERS at Karika here. And so what you can see is that in this case, this player has been working pretty substantially on his GERS and his FERS, and it's showing up in his scores. And you can kind of see that over here in our handy dandy charts, right? So what you can see is if we look at those GERS, right, kind of bouncing around 30 here, kind of got a little bit worse, and then really buckled down and started focusing on it, and like boom, went up pretty substantially. Same happened here with fairways in regulation, right? Kind of bouncing around here, got a little worse there, and then really focused in. Now the funny thing here is you can see that this player was doing a much better job on his short game putting, and then more recently, struggled a little bit there, which is why, right? Like potentially what could have happened is we could have had a much better situation with respect to this, these games right here if we had had a little bit of a better, putts per hole situation there. Peter, so I guess your GERS have been getting, you would look something like this because your GERS have been getting better. Is that right?
Well, I didn't say they were getting better. I'm working on it.
Oh, pardon me. We're investing in it.
I would like to see that same pattern on the graph. That is correct.
There we go. All right. Party. Cool. So now let's talk about like how to change our behavior in order to do a better job based on what we have diagnosed as an issue, right? And so these are kind of like common areas for improvement in your game. So if you are weak at your greens and regulation, well, you're probably not, if you don't give yourself 2 putts to par by hitting the green, it's going to be hard to score well. If you only get on the green with 1 putt to go, like that's going to be tough. You're going to be putting pressure on yourself to try to 1 putt, which, you might end up taking lower percentage putt strokes, right? And like missing bigger. And so like if you have so that might be a thing to address there. If you have weak fairways in regulation, it's going to be harder to hit the green, right? So if you're going into the rough, right, it's going to be hard for you to hit the green there, which of course will then set yourself up for a tough putting average there. And then moreover, if you have a weak putting average, right, like if you're just, if you can't 2-putt, then that's just going to be a problem across the board there, right? And so what you can do is by looking at this, you can say, hey, where is my biggest area for improvement, which I think Peter was noting earlier there, like where's my biggest area for improvement, where's the bang for my buck, and can I manufacture a good improvement for myself there, and then I'm going to focus in on that in the game, right, like on the course, and then also from a practice standpoint as well. So as an example here, you can say, okay, well, like let's do a diagnosis and prescription example. So maybe what we have is a problem where someone's doing a bad job of hitting greens in regulation, right? They're not doing a great job with respect to their GERS. As noted earlier, if we're not ending up with the green, with 2 strokes to reach par, seems like that might be a problem, right? It's going to make it such that we're putting pressure on ourselves to be a little bit more aggressive with respect to our putting. Cool. So we can't just like magically say, all right, great, like let's fix our green and regulations. That's not how it works. Why are we having a hard time hitting our greens, right? So what we have to do is we have to go upstream and diagnose where that issue is coming from, because there could be a variety of root causes. And so in this example, are we coming off of roughs, right? Like, is the reason why we're missing greens because we're shooting out of the rough? Okay. Why did we end up in the rough to begin with, right? Is this it might be an upstream thing? Is it actually because we're coming off of fairways? Right? Are we coming off the fairways? Okay, where are we missing the green from? Is it because we're missing far? Is it because we're missing the green when we're closer in? What's the club that we're using when we're missing the green? And then how are we missing? Are we missing right? Are we missing left? Are we missing short? Are we missing far? So by investigating these upstream drivers, we can say, oh, you know what? My problem is that, I'm struggling with respect to, I don't know, like my shorter wedges, and I'm missing left and missing right there. Okay, cool. Well, maybe what we can do there is I can shorten up on my approaches, right, and give myself a little bit more distance to the hole. One, like I can do that in game, and then the second thing I can do is I can practice those wedges, on the at the range. Peter, when you think about your greens and regulation improvement areas right now, do you have a hypothesis as to what your kind of like root cause might be?
Accuracy and consistency with mid-range irons.
Right. The example that I was using was probably kind of a little dumb, where it's like usually like people are better with their wedges. So in your case, it's like the opposite situation where, um, it's what was that, like 5-iron, 7-iron?
My 5, 6, 7, mostly like 5 and 6, right? I'm a little
Those are hard.
left, I'm a little right, I'm long, I'm short. So I have to take that extra stroke when I am using my wedge to get on the green instead of sticking that par 4 green in 2, right?
Got it. Right. And so in that case, maybe the way that we might modify our play there is, I think there's actually an interesting question there. How would you modify in your situation? Aside from just getting better at the 5-iron, the 6-iron, which of course is a range behavior, like a practice behavior, is there something that you can do from a play modification standpoint to, like, how we always talk about here at H, and we talk about, the man who knows his limitations has none. Does that mean like shortening up off of the the tee, such that you're using your fairway, your fairway woods that you're better with, or does that mean like being a little bit more aggressive with your driver to try to get it a little bit closer? How do you modify your play, or can you just not? It's just like a question of like getting better with those mid-range irons.
Yeah, so I see 3 options right now, right? So like if you go like the leading indicator route of like, okay, if I could use more 7, 8, 9 iron, maybe I'd be more accurate. So that would be, getting more aggressive with my driver while still trying to keep my furs high, right? So
Mm-hmm.
kind of tricky there. Other
Yep.
option I see is probably like, okay, if I can really improve my putting and like that
Mm-hmm.
chip I need to take and chip on in one putt every time, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's less of an issue. Both
Mm-hmm.
of those seem pretty challenging. So like I'm going full bore at like swing training on like 5, 6, 7 iron. Yeah.
Got it. So it's not a play modification thing. It's just essentially just like, yeah, you know what? I just got to get better with the, the 5-iron, the 6-iron.
Something's got to get better in there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like maybe an easier example of this for diagnosing might be, if somebody is, if somebody has a problem with their fairways in regulation, and the reason why they have a problem with their fairways in regulation, is because like they're missing right or they're missing left with their driver. Well, but like they actually are pretty solid when it comes to their fairway irons or their mid-range irons. Well, maybe what they then do instead is they like hit they hit a 3-wood off the tee, right? Sacrifice 10 yards or 20 yards on the drive, but at least they're hitting the fairway, and then that makes it such that their approach is a lot better as opposed to trying to hit out of the rough. That would be,
Leave that driver at home. Yeah.
yeah, that might be a good example of like modifying your play. And then, at the range, what we might then do is say, hey, you know what, we're going to focus in on doing driver work at the range in order to remove that, hook or remove that slice, which of course we would measure via our launch tracker, see whether or not that's happening. Wonderful. So cool. Golf. How's this related to sales? Well, similar situations happening in sales, where there's a data revolution happening in sales, and it's time for folks to go from, making things up and kind of sticking their finger in their wind to being data driven there. So the same way that if you want to par a hole, we got to work backwards, got to get in the hole, got to get it on the green. In order to get it on the green, we got to get it on the fairway. The same is true with sales, right? If we want to close deals, we got to work backwards. If we want to close the deal, we got to prove value. In order to earn ourselves the opportunity to prove value, we need to nail the first meeting in the disco. This is obviously a simplified sales motion here, but then the thing that we can do is we can measure each of these stages to understand where the opportunity is for improvement. The way that, of course, we measure how we're closing the deal is win rate. And then specifically, win rate from a stage like a proposal, like a down funnel stage. In order to measure how we're doing with respect to proving value, we might count things like if you have a pilot sales motion or a POC or like a scoping stage, we might say, how many times are we entering that scoping stage, or how many times are we entering that pilot stage? And then moreover, what we might say is, how is our win rate from that pilot? And then in order to see whether or not we're actually like even getting there, well, we got to really nail at the top of the funnel. We got to hit our fairways, if you will. And so what that means is looking at stage conversion at the top of the funnel, seeing, hey, are we getting things out of our first, like, are we getting things to disco? Are we getting things to that next stage after that, whatever it is in your sales motion? And also, a more kind of rudimentary way of looking at this is just like, what is the follow-up meeting ratio? Are reps doing a good job of getting to second, third, et cetera meetings, right? And so the cool thing is that all of this data is available, right? And so what we just need to do is measure it, right? So we have to measure it and interpret it. And there's a variety of ways that you can do this. And so just the same way that we have input metrics and output metrics in golf, where the input might be hitting fairways, intermediary might be hitting greens, and then closing, of course, is getting the ball in the hole and our putting average there. The same is true in sales as well. We have our inputs, whether SDRs, with activity inputs. We've got our outputs with like opportunities created or meetings created. Same with AEs. Like our inputs are going to be things like customer facing meetings, new opportunity ownership. Our outputs, of course, are going to be bookings and wins. And then, of course, we have our efficiency metrics across the board. So with SDRs, that might be things like the number of activities that are required in order to create an opportunity, or the conversion rate between opportunities touched to opportunities created. In AE land, that would be things like win rate or our opportunity stage conversion rates there. And so just as a kind of a quick little plug here, this is literally what we do at Atrium, is we help sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve team performance. And the reason why we think that's really important is because sales managers are really a critical critical way of making organizations, or making sales organizations, far more effective. For a variety of reasons, like they help with rep productivity and help with higher effort. But really what it comes down to is that they make their reps more performant by coaching them up, helping diagnose, and then fix the kind of like the hitches in their swing, or the hitches in their gameplay. And by doing that, what they do is they make it such that their reps are more likely to be top performers. And the mechanism by which you have to do that, though, is it's not just like magic, right? There's actually a set of behaviors that managers have to do in order to make sure that they're supporting their reps in that regard. Not complicated, of course, for managers to be doing deal inspection and strategy. It's what they naturally gravitate towards. So, people don't really need to be reminded around that. However, what they do need to be reminded and enabled to do is things like tracking progress towards goals, like both from a leading indicator and a lagging indicator standpoint, and those efficiency metrics. They need to be bringing that data into one-on-ones, which are essentially coaching sessions, not pipeline review meetings. And they need to be monitoring the ramp of new hires, diagnosing issues on your rep, like, hey, you've got a FUR problem. Hey, you've got a GUR problem. Hey, it looks like you've got a win rate problem at a proposal. Hey, it looks like you have an untouched opportunity pipeline hygiene problem. Right? And then it's similarly flipping it around and standardizing the success of top performers. And so the problem is that right now, managers typically struggle to do this for kind of two main reasons. One is they're not really enabled to do this because this is kind of a new behavior. No shade for sales managers and sales leaders. We've only really had this data available for like the last 10 years or so. But that still means that we got to get our act together now. So managers aren't really enabled to do this, and also they don't really come from the math department, if you will, which is fine, right? But I think this is compounded by the fact that the things that we give our managers and our leaders are not really focused on helping them manage by metric, but instead are like horizontal analytics tools that are made for analysts, that are made for for BI honchos and what have you. And so this is why it's unsurprising that managers end up struggling with this, which is really kind of a bummer because especially in tougher economic times, what you really have to make sure you're doing is using data in order to make sure that your efficiency is where it needs to be, making sure that your reps are having fast and healthy ramps, and then making sure that they're taking a full swing at every opportunity. And so the way to not do that, of course, is to just be very, very deal centric, right? Because like it would essentially be the equivalent of like a trying to coach up a golfer by just like looking at their swing every single time, like with tunnel vision, as opposed to lifting up and saying, actually, across all of your holes, you have a problem off the tee, right? Like, it'd be very difficult to diagnose that if all you're doing is looking at every swing, like on a swing by swing basis, versus aggregating up and saying, oh man, I didn't realize this, right? But like in general, across the board, like you're having a problem, not on every swing, like not on every tee, but you're having more of a problem off the tee than you are coming off the fairway. And so that's why what we say is that sales managers really ought to have their own purpose-made software to allow them to improve performance using metrics. And what that looks like in the case of Atrium is every KPI that reps and teams could possibly need, proactive tracking of progress towards goals, early warning indicators on issues with respect to metrics, and of course performance issue diagnosis. And so what we see out of out of impacts on with our customers is anywhere between a 30 to 70% improvement rate across a variety of metrics. So a gentleman named Jim Murphy is absolutely fantastic over at Gainsight, saw substantial decreases in stuck opportunities for his team after they implemented Atrium, which ended up revealing north of $3 million in stuck pipeline and kind of loosening that up. Another fantastic sales organization run by Justin Bullock over here at Envoy. After implementing Atrium, that a 50% increase in the number of customer-facing meetings by their account executives and a 40% reduction in their pipeline hygiene problems there. Again, great management by metric. Another customer of Atrium's staff base had an initiative around AE prospecting. So after implementing Atrium, saw a 50% rise in AE prospecting because they said, hey, we're going to throw down the gauntlet here. We're going to make sure that we're measuring whether or not our account executives are doing the prospecting behaviors they're supposed to be doing. Lo and behold, when you measure it, you can manage it. And they had a 50% raise in prospecting activity and a 30% raise in AE meeting volume. And the same is true over on the SDR side as well, where Pendo saw more than a doubling in pipeline generation on a per SDR basis after implementing Atrium. So turns out, you start measuring things, good stuff happens because you can start changing rep behavior, which is super important. Cool. So now we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about how you do this in practice, like how we actually change these behaviors and make it such that we can use data to improve the performance of our individuals. And so the big thing there really is just coaching, right? And so what we're doing, what coaching is coaching is taking information that you use to observe an issue in the world, kind of like create a hypothesis around that issue, is presenting it to the rep or the golfer, right? The rep in question, saying, hey, is this the case, right? Do you see this? Let's think about let's form some hypotheses around what might be root causing this, right? Are we missing right? Are we missing left? Are we missing long? Are we missing short? What is the thing that's driving the root cause of this issue? And then what we're going to do is we're going to prescribe a solution that you and I are going to, we're going to hold ourselves accountable to here. So some examples of this might be, a not coaching example would be like, hey, Peter, when's that Lockheed deal coming in? Versus, hey, what, Peter, what's concerning you about the Lockheed deal? I noticed that we seem to only be engaged with 3 contacts there. Normally, we would probably be multi-threaded with more like 7 to 10 at this stage in the deal. What do we need to do there, right? Can you make this forecast bigger? Yeah, what? Versus, hey, I've like a data-based observation. Hey, I've noticed that your forecast seems to be pacing behind here. Are there ideas on things that we can maybe pull forward, or maybe this ship has already sailed, but like, is there a mechanism by which we can avoid this situation in the future right? Can we do some more prospecting right now? Can we do something, can we do some referral prospecting across your customers in order to set our next quarter up for more success here? Peter, when you think about kind of like your favorite examples of data-driven coaching, what kind of like pops to mind there for you?
I love the third example that you have on here of like, hey, we need to pump up those numbers, rookie, right? Like just do more activity, right? I hear that a lot from managers before realizing like, okay, well, we actually need to understand the quality of that activity, what that activity is, so we can say do more of this specifically, whether it's something as simple as, hey, you actually are having fewer meetings instead of get more meetings. It's, hey, I've noticed you're having fewer second and third and fourth meetings with each prospect. How can I help you with like nail that first meeting so you can get the second meeting and continue the evaluation? Like that's a great example.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I like this one, of course, because like, pipeline hygiene is always it's insidious, right? Like, I need more leads. I need more leads. No, you need to not neglect the things that you like, the ops that are in your pipe, man. Um, cool. So some other examples here. So I think the thing here, though, and Peter was talking about this earlier about improving his golf game, is that it's not a one-time thing. It's a loop, right? It's a loop. And so in this case, the example I like to use is there's this book called Boyd. It's about this guy named John Boyd, who is a um, modern warfare theorist who talked about like how dogfighters and how to like fighter pilots competed with each other or fought with each other. And really what it kind of came down to is you're observing, it's called the OODA loop. You're observing, you're orienting, and then you decide and then act, right? And so in this case, what observation is it's taking stock of what's happening in the world, right? Taking stock of what's happening in the world. In the case of a fighter pilot, it's like looking around and seeing like where you are as compared to your opponent, what have you. In our world, what that is it's like taking stock of the metrics. Like, hey, what are my FERS at? What are my GERs at? What are my putting percentage at? In the case of sales, it's like looking at the metrics for a given rep and understanding where their shortfall is. And then the next thing is understanding where the shortfall is. That's the orienting. Like, oh, okay, cool. It looks like you have a win rate problem, like you have a conversion rate problem out of this stage right here. All the other ones look okay as compared to your peers. That's the problem right there. Great. I'm going to decide on that. Cool. We've oriented yourself. We've decided that that's the issue. Now we're going to act to resolve that. And so what that might be is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to join your calls that are at that stage. Or alternatively, what we might do is we're going to do a day of like practice coaching on this specific stage. Or it might be, hey, I listened to a bunch of calls at that stage to figure out where the issue is there. Kind of like, let's look at a bunch of swings in these situations right here. Oh, I see what the problem is. You're doing this thing wrong. Great. We're going to practice that talk track. We're going to practice this behavior. And then you're going to show me, right? As you like, I need you to send me the chorus clip or the gong clip of you changing that behavior. So right? Like, hey, I know that I'm going to have to send that recording to Pete. So I'm going to do this behavior in the call, right? So we'll kind of give a little example of what that looks like in practice here with like some live data. So this is actually this is real Atrium data here that's been anonymized. And so you essentially had a rep where these are conversion rates here, conversion rate from one stage to the next. And you can see at the bottom here, these are the different stages, right? These are the stages of the sales motion. And so in this case, this rep had a couple places where, so he's in orange here. You had a couple places where his conversion rates were a little bit lighter as compared to his peers. You can specifically see like, issue with respect to meeting pending here, and then also a pretty substantial issue converting things out of proposal and then converting things out of contract there. And so as a result, what we did was we worked on improving their top of funnel behavior. And so this is a different view of a different metric, which is this is counting, this is looking at that conversion rate out of the top of the funnel where there was issues previously over time. So in this case, the x-axis here is like on a month-by-month basis what do the conversion rates look like there? And what you can see is, so, this reps was a little bit lower here, and actually it was tanking here. With that coaching, he was able to get that conversion rate substantially higher out of that top of funnel stage. And then as a result, what happened was, this is a different metric that is counting, right? Counting how many opportunities are getting into a pilot state. So this is kind of like, the way to think about this is like greens hit, perhaps, right? So it's like, okay, cool. If I'm doing a good job of getting onto the fairway, right? Of giving myself of hitting the fairway via getting out of the top of the funnel, that then should allow me to then hit more greens here. And so what you can see is, like, lo and behold, this rep did a better job of getting out of the top of the funnel, and, like, lo and behold, he starts initiating way more pilots than than he previously had. And then moreover, what you can see is we also worked on some late stage behaviors here, which then drove a higher win rate out of proposal. It had been kind of in the dumps, as we had seen here, but by doing a good job of working on good behaviors out of proposal there, lo and behold, that win rate went up quite a bit. And so the rep went from this situation where, like, conversion rate out of proposal and out of contract were kind of in the dumps there, to a much better situation here, where all of his behaviors, not 100% there, but much better than they had been previously there. And so what came out of that as a result was, this is actually pipeline ownership by that same rep. And you could see that the rep had kind of like been bumping along at right around here at like 20K or so from pipeline ownership standpoint. Well, because stuff was falling out of the pipeline as quickly as it was coming in. In this case, now, once a lot more things are making their way down the pipe and into pilot and converting, lo and behold, that pipeline is building more and more and more and more there. So that's just like a little example of, like, how you can do coaching and to change behavior based on the based on where the hitch is in a given rep swing there. Peter, any stuff you wanted to add here?
Yeah, I love this example, especially around like the idea of data-driven golf too, because like, right, there are specific coaching points that happen there, whether it was asynchronously with, a manager jumping onto those calls, or more effort put into those, stage calls through like chorus recordings, gong recordings, whatever you use. It's just like using that golf CRM data to make sure we're practicing the right club at the range, right? Like, if we're going to sit there and just hit our driver at the range all day long, it's not necessarily going to fix the problem at hand. But taking that step back to look at that bigger picture and say, it's my GERS. I need to work on my short game, it looks like, or my putts per hole, if that's the issue, right? Intentional practice makes perfect. And that's how you do it most efficiently. Yeah.
Love it. Cool. Well, I think that's everything that we had to cover today. But as noted, so hopefully folks enjoyed this. As noted, if you'd like to get a copy of Every Shot Counts, along with 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach, it's kind of a great 1-2 data-driven management. So data-driven golf improvement, data-driven sales management, and then also a dozen Atrium Callaway balls. We're going to go ahead and drop a link there for folks to sign up for that. Hi, Angelica. Are you here to escort us off the stage?
I am. I'm here for wrap up. Thank you, Pete and Peter, for today's wonderful session on data-driven sales and golf. Super informative. Just a reminder for folks, the recording and key takeaways along with Pete's presentation will be made available on the MSP website before the end of the day. Also, big thanks to our sponsor today, Atrium. I've added their link in the chat. Be sure to check them out, as well as this link for your golf goodies. So definitely take advantage of that. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you at the next event. Bye.